Good afternoon. This is knowledge time. Welcome, alchemists. Today we're going to be reading from the book The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Now we're at chapter 2. Chapter 2 is Transform Self-Love into Empathy, and it is the law of narcissism. The law of narcissism. We all naturally possess the most remarkable tool for connecting to people and attaining social power, empathy. When cultivated and properly used, it can allow us to see into the moods and minds of others, giving us the power to anticipate people's actions and gently lowering their resistance. This instrument, however, is blunted by our habitual self-absorption. We are all narcissistic, some deeper on the spectrum than others. Our mission in life is to come to terms with this self-love and learn how to turn our sensitivity outward toward others instead of inward. We must recognize at the same time the toxic narcissists among us before getting enmeshed in their dramas and poisoned by their envy. Okay, this is going to be part 1 of chapter 2. Part 1 is the narcissistic spectrum. From the moment we are born, we humans feel a never-ending need for attention. We are social animals to the core. Our survival and happiness depend on the bonds we form with others. If people do not pay attention to us, we cannot connect to them on any level. Some of this is purely physical. We must have people looking at us to feel alive, as those who have gone through long periods of isolation can attest. Without eye contact, we begin to doubt our existence and to descend into a deep depression. But this need is also deeply psychological. Through the quality of attention we receive from others, we feel recognized and appreciated for who we are. Our sense of self-worth depends on this, because this is so important to the human animal. People will do almost anything to get attention, including committing a crime or attempting suicide. Look behind almost any action. You will see this need as a primary motivation. In trying to satisfy our hunger for attention, however, we face an inevitable problem. There is only so much of it to go around. In the family, we have to compete with our siblings, at school with classmates, at work with colleagues. The moments in which we feel recognized and appreciated are fleeting. People can largely be indifferent to our fate, as they must deal with their own problems. There are even some who are downright hostile and disrespectful to us. How do we handle those moments when we feel psychologically alone or even abandoned? We can double our efforts to get attention and notice, but this can exhaust our energy, and it can often have the opposite effect. People who try too hard seem desperate and repulse the attention they want. We simply cannot rely on others to give us constant validation, and yet we crave it. Facing this dilemma from early childhood on, most of us come up with a solution that works quite well. We create a self, an image of ourselves that comforts us and makes us feel validated from within. This self is composed of our tastes, our opinions, how we look at the world, what we value. In the building this self-image, we tend to accentuate our positive qualities and explain away our flaws. We cannot go far in this, for if our self-image is too divorced from reality, other people will make us aware of the discrepancy, and we will doubt ourselves. But if it is done properly, in the end we have a self that we can love and cherish. Our energy turns inward. We become the center of attention. When we experience those inevitable moments when we are alone and not feeling appreciated, we can retreat to this self and soothe ourselves. If we have moments of doubt and depression, our self-love rises us up, makes us feel worthy and even superior to others. This self-image operates as a thermostat, helping us to regulate our doubts and insecurities. We are no longer completely dependent on others for attention and recognition. We have self-esteem. This ideal might seem strange. We generally take this self-image completely for granted, like the air we breathe. It operates on a largely unconscious bias. We don't feel or see the thermostat as it operates. The best way to literally visualize this dynamic is to look at those who lack a coherent sense of self. People we shall call deep narcissists. In constructing a self that we can hold on to and love, the key moment in its development occurs between the ages of 2 and 5 years old. As we slowly separate from our mother, we face a world in which we cannot get instant gratification. We also become aware that we are alone and yet dependent on our parents for survival. Our answer is to identify with the best qualities of our parents, their strength, their ability to soothe us, and incorporate these qualities into ourselves. If our parents encourage us in our first efforts at independence, if they validate our need to feel strong and recognize our unique qualities, then our self-image takes root, and we can slowly build upon it. Deep narcissists have a sharp break in this early development, and so they never quite construct a consistent and realistic feeling of self. Their mothers or fathers might be deep narcissists themselves, too self-absorbed or to acknowledge the child, to encourage its early efforts at independence, or alternatively, the parents could be enmeshed, over-involved in the child's life, suffocating it with attention, isolating it from others, and living through its advancement as a means to validate their own self-worth. They give the child no room to establish a self. In the backgrounds of almost all deep narcissists, we find either abandonment or enmeshment. The result is that they have no self to retreat to, no foundation for self-esteem, and are completely dependent on the attention they get from others to make them feel alive and worthy. In childhood, if such narcissists are extroverts, they can function reasonably well and even thrive. They become masters at attracting notice and monopolizing attention. They can appear vicious and exciting in a child. Such qualities can seem a sign of future social success, but underneath the surface, they are becoming dangerously addicted to the hits of attention they stimulate to make them feel whole and worthy. If they are introverts, they will retreat to a fantasy life, imagining a self that is quite superior to others. Since they will not get validation of their self-image from others because it is so unrealistic, they will also have moments of great doubt and even self-loathing. They are either a god or a worm, lacking a coherent core. They could imagine themselves to be anyone, and so their fantasies will keep shifting as they try on new personalities. The nightmare for deep narcissists generally arrives in their 20s and 30s. They have failed to develop that inner thermostat, a cohesive sense of self to love and depend upon. The extroverts must constantly attract attention to feel alive and appreciated. They become more dramatic, more exhibitionistic, and grandiose. They can become tiresome and even pathetic. They have to change friends and scenes so that they can feel a fresh audience. Introverts fall deeper into a fantasy self, being socially awkward yet radiating superiority. They tend to alienate people, increasing their dangerous isolation. In both cases, drugs or alcohol or other form of addiction can become a necessary crutch to soothe them in the inevitable moments of doubts and depression. You can recognize deep narcissists by the following behavior patterns. If they are ever insulted or challenged, they have no defense, nothing internal to soothe them or validate their effort. They generally react with great rage, thirsting for vengeance, full of a sense of righteousness. This is the only way they know how to assuage their insecurities. In such battles, they will position themselves as the wounded victim, confusing others and even drawing sympathy. They are prickly and oversensitive, Almost everything is taken personally. They can become quite paranoid and have enemies in all directions to point to. You can see an impatient or distant look on their face whenever you talk about something that does not directly involve them in some way. They immediately turn the conversation back to themselves with some story or anecdote to distract from the insecurity behind it. They can be prone to vicious bouts of envy if they see others getting the attention they feel they deserve. They frequently display extreme self confidence. This always helps to gain attention, and it neatly covers up their gaping and inner emptiness and their fragmented sense of self. But but beware if this confidence is ever truly put to the test. When it comes to other people in their lives, deep narcissists have an unusual relationship that is hard for us to understand. They tend to see others as extensions of themselves, what is known as self objects. People exist as instruments for attention and validation. Their desire is to control them like they control their own arm or leg. In a relationship, they will slowly make the partner cut off contact with friends. There must be no competition for attention. Some highly talented deep narcissists, see stories starting on page 54 for examples, manage to find some redemption through their work, channeling their energies and getting the attention they crave through their accomplishments. Although they tend to remain quite erratic and volatile. For most deep narcissists, however, it can be difficult to concentrate on their work, lacking the self-esteem thermostat. They are prone to continually worrying about what others think of them. This makes it hard to actually focus attention outward for long periods of time and to deal with the impatience and anxiety that comes with work. Such types tend to change jobs and careers quite frequently. This becomes the nail in their coffin, unable to attract genuine recognition through their accomplishments. They are forever thrown back on the need to artificially stimulate attention. Deep narcissists can be annoying and frustrating to deal with. They can also become quite harmful if we get too close to them. They entangle us in their never-ending dramas and make us feel guilty if we are not continually paying them attention. Relationships with them are most unsatisfying, and having one as a partner or spouse can be deadly. In the end, everything must revolve around them. The best solution in cases is to get out of their way once we identify them as a deep narcissist. There's one variety of this type, however, that is more dangerous and toxic because of the levels of power he or she can attain, namely the narcissistic leader. This type has been around for a long time. In the Bible, Absalom was perhaps the first recorded example, but we find frequent references in ancient literature to others, Alcibiades, Cicero, and Emperor Nero, to name a few. Almost all dictator types and tyrannical CEOs fall into this category. They generally have more ambition than the average deep narcissist, and for a while can funnel this energy into work. Full of narcissistic self-confidence, they attract attention and followers. They say and do things that other people don't dare say or do, which seems admirable and authentic. They might have a vision for some innovative product, and because they radiate such confidence, they can find others to help them realize their vision. They are experts at using people. If they have success, a terrible momentum is set in place. More people are attracted to their leadership, which only inflates their grandiose tendency. If anyone dares to challenge them, they are more prone than others to go into that deep narcissistic rage. They are hypersensitive. They also like to stir up constant drama as a means to justify their power. They are the only ones who can solve the problems they create. This also gives them more opportunities to be the center of attention. The workplace is never stable under their direction. Sometimes they can become entrepreneurs, people who found a company because of their charisma and ability to attract followers. They can have creative flair as well. But for many of these leader types, eventually their own inner instability and chaos will come to be mirrored in the company or group they lead. They cannot forge a coherent structure or organization. Everything must flow through them. They have to control everything and everyone. They're self-objects. They will proclaim this as a virtue, as being authentic and spontaneous, when really they lack the ability to focus and create something solid. They tend to burn and destroy whatever they create. Let us imagine narcissism as a way of gauging the level of our self-absorption as if it existed on a measurable scale from high to low. At a certain depth, let us say below the halfway mark on the scale, people enter the realm of deep narcissism. Once they reach this depth, it is very difficult for them to raise themselves back up because they lack the self-esteem device. The deep narcissist becomes completely self-absorbed, almost always below the mark. If for a moment they manage to engage with others, some comment or action will trigger their insecurities and they will go plummeting down. But mostly they tend to sink deeper into themselves over time. Other people are instruments. Reality is just a reflection of their needs. Constant attention is their only way of survival. Above that halfway mark is what we shall call the functional narcissist, where most of us reside. We also are self-absorbed, but what prevents us from falling deep into ourselves is a coherent sense of self that we can rely upon and love. It is ironic that the word narcissism has come to mean self-love, when it is in fact the case that the worst narcissists have no cohesion, self to love, which is the source of their problem. This creates some inner resiliency. We may have deeper narcissistic moments, fluctuating below the mark, particularly when depressed or challenged in life, but inevitably we elevate ourselves, not feeling continually insecure or wounded, not always needing to fish for attention. Functional narcissists can turn their attention outward into their work and into building relationships with people. Our task as students of human nature is threefold. First, we must fully understand the phenomena of the deep narcissist. Although they are in the minority, some of them can inflict an unusual amount of harm in the world. We must be able to distinguish the toxic type that stir up drama and try to turn us into objects they can use for their purposes. They can draw us in with their unusual energy, but if we become enmeshed, it can be a nightmare to disengage. They are masters at turning the tables and making others feel guilty. Narcissistic leaders are the most dangerous of all, and we must resist their pull and see through the facade of their apparent creativity. Knowing how to handle the deep narcissist in our lives is an important art for all of us. Second, we must be honest about our own nature and not deny it. We are all narcissists. In a conversation, we are all champing at the bit to talk, to tell our story, to give our opinion. We like people who share our ideas. They reflect back to us our good taste. If we happen to be assertive, we see assertiveness as a positive quality because it is ours, whereas others, more timid, will rate it as obnoxious and value introspective qualities. We are all prone to flattery because of our self-love. Moralizers who try to separate themselves and denounce the narcissists in the world today are often the biggest narcissists of them all. They love the sound of their voice as they point fingers and preach. We are all on the spectrum of self-absorption. Creating a self that we can love is a healthy development, and there should be no stigma attached to it. Without self-esteem from within, we could fall into deep narcissism. But to move beyond functional narcissism, which should be our goal, we must first be honest with ourselves. Trying to deny our self-absorbed nature, trying to pretend we are somehow more altruistic than others, makes it impossible for us to transform ourselves. Third, and most important, we must begin to make the transformation into the healthy narcissist. Healthy narcissists have a stronger, even more resilient sense of self. They tend to hover closer to the top of the scale. They recover more quickly from any wounds or insults. They do not need as much validation from others. They realize at some point in life that they have limits and flaws. They can laugh at these flaws and not take slights so personally. In many ways, by embracing the full picture of themselves, their self-love is more real and complete. From this stronger inner position, they can turn their attention outward more often and more easily. This attention goes in one of two directions, and sometimes both. First, they are able to direct their focus and their love into their work, becoming great artists, creators, and inventors. Because their outward focus on the work is more intense, they tend to be successful in their ventures, which gives them the necessary attention and validation. They can have moments of doubt and insecurity, and artists can be notoriously brittle, but work stands as a continual release from too much self-absorption. The other direction healthy narcissists take is toward people, developing empathetic powers. Imagine empathy as the realm lying at the very top of the scale and beyond, complete absorption in others. But our very nature, we humans have tremendous abilities to understand people from the inside out. In earliest years, we felt completely bonded with our mother, and we could sense her every mood and read her every emotion in a proverbial way, unlike any other animal or primate. We also had the ability to extend this beyond the mother to other caregivers and people in our vicinity. This is the physical form of empathy that we feel even to this day with our closest friends, spouses, or partners. We also have a natural ability to take the perspective of others, to think our way inside their minds. These powers largely lie dormant because of our self-absorption. But in our 20s and beyond, feeling more confident about ourselves, we can begin to focus outward on people and rediscover these powers. Those who practice this empathy often become superior social observers in the arts of science, therapists, and leaders of the highest order. The need to develop this empathy is greater than ever. Various studies have indicated a gradual increase in the levels of self-absorption and narcissists in young people since the late 1970s, with a much higher spike since 2000. Much of this can be attributed to technology and the internet. People simply spend less time in social interactions and more time socializing online, which makes it increasingly difficult to develop empathy and sharpen social skills. Like any skill, empathy comes through the quality of attention. If your attention is continually interrupted by the need to look at your smartphone, you are never really gaining a foothold in the feelings or perspective of other people. You are continually drawn back to yourself, flitting about the surface of social interactions, never really engaging. Even in the crowd, you remain essentially alone. People come to serve a function, not to bond with, but to placate your insecurities. Our brains were built for continual social interaction. The complexity of this interaction is one of the main factors that drastically increased our intelligence as a species. At a certain point, involving ourselves less with others has a net negative effect on the brain itself and atrophies our social muscle. To make matters worse, our culture needs to emphasize the supreme value of the individual and individual rights, encouraging greater self-involvement. We find more and more people who cannot imagine that others have a different perspective, that we are all not exactly the same in what we desire or think. You must try to run counter to these developments and create empathetic energy. Each side of the spectrum has its particular momentum. Deep narcissism tends to sink you deeper as you connect to reality lessons and you are unable to really develop your work or your relationship. Empathy does the opposite. As you increasingly turn your attention outward, you get constant positive feedback. People want to be around you more. You develop your empathetic muscle. Your work improves without trying. You gain the attentions that all humans thrive on. Empathy creates its own upward positive momentum. The following are the four components that go into the empathetic skill set. Number 1, the empathetic attitude. Empathy is more than anything a state of mind, a different way of relating to others. The greater danger you face is your general assumption that you really understand people and that you can quickly judge and categorize them. Instead, you must begin with the assumption that you are ignorant and that you have natural biases that will make you judge people incorrectly. The people around you present a mask that suits their purposes. You mistake the mask for reality. Let go of your tendencies to make snap judgments. Open your mind to seeing people in a new light. Do not assume that you are similar or that they share your values. Each person you meet is like an undiscovered country with a very particular psychological chemistry that you will carefully explore. You are more than ready to be surprised by what you uncover. This flexibility, open spirit is similar to creative energy, a willingness to consider more possibilities and options. In fact, developing your empathy will also improve your creative powers. The best place to begin this transformation in your attitude is in your numerous daily conversations. Try reversing your normal impulse to talk and give your opinions, desiring instead to hear the other person's point of view. You have tremendous curiosity in this direction. Cut off your incessant interior monologues as best you can. Give full attention to the other. What matters here is the quality of your listening, so that in the course of the conversation you can mirror back to the other person things they said, or things they were left unsaid but that you sense. This will have a tremendous seductive effect. As part of this attitude, you are giving people the same level of indulgence that you give yourself. For instance, we all have a tendency to do the following. When we make a mistake, we attribute it to circumstances that pushed us into doing it. But when others make a mistake, we tend to see it as a character flaw, as something that flowed from their imperfect personality. This is known as the attribution bias. You must work against this. With an empathetic attitude, you consider first the circumstances that might have a person do what they did, giving them the same benefit of the doubt as you give yourself. Finally, adopting this attitude depends on the quality of your self-love. If you feel terribly superior to others or gripe by insecurity, your moments of empathy and absorption in people will be shallow. What you need is a complete acceptance of your character, including your flaws, which you can see clearly but appreciate and love. You are not perfect. You are not an angel. You have the same nature as others. With this attitude, you can laugh at yourself and let slights wash over you. From a position of genuine inner strength and resilience, you can more easily direct your attention outward. Number 2, visceral empathy. Empathy is an instrument of emotional attunement. It is hard for us to read or figure out the thoughts of another person, but feelings and moods are much easier for us to pick up. We are all prone to catching the emotions of another person. The physical boundaries between us and other people are much more permeable than we realize. People are continually affecting our moods. What we are doing here is turning this psychological response into knowledge. Pay deep attention to the moods of people as indicated by their body language and tone of voice. When they talk, they have a feeling tone that is either in sync or not in sync with what they are saying. This tone can be one of confidence, insecurity, defensiveness, arrogance, frustration, elation. This tone manifests itself physically in their voice. their gestures, and their posture. In each encounter, you must try to detect this before even paying attention to what they are saying. This will register to you viscerally in your own physical response to them. A defensive tone on their part will tend to create a like feeling in you. A key element you are trying to figure out is people's intentions. There is almost always an emotion behind an intention, and beyond their words, you are attuning yourself to what they want, their goals, which will also register physically in you if you pay attention. For instance, someone you know suddenly shows unusual interest in your life, gives you the kind of attention you've never had. It is a real attempt to connect or a distraction, a means of softening you up so they can use you for their own purposes. Instead of focusing on their words, which show interest and excitement, focus on the overall feeling tone that you pick up, how deeply they are listening. They are making consistent eye contact. Does it feel like even though they are listening to you, they are absorbed in themselves? If you are the object of sudden attention, but it seems unreliable, they are probably intending to ask something of you, to use and manipulate you in some way. This kind of empathy depends largely on mirror neurons, those neurons that fire in our brain when we watch someone do something, such as picking up an object, just as if we were doing it ourselves. This allows us to put ourselves in the shoes of others and to feel what it must be like. Studies have revealed that people who score high on tests of empathy are generally excellent mimics. When someone smiles or winces in pain, they tend to unconsciously imitate the expression, giving them a feel for what others are feeling. When we see someone smiling and in a good mood, it tends to have a contagious effect on us. We can consciously use this power in trying to get into the emotion of others, either by literally mimicking their facial gestures or by conjuring up memories of similar experiences that stirred such emotions. Before Alex Haley began writing Roots, he spent some time in the dark interior of a ship, trying to recreate the claustrophobic horror slaves must have experienced. A visceral connection to the feelings allowed him to write himself into their world. As an adjunct to this, mirroring people on any level will draw out an empathetic response from them. This can be physical, and it is known as the chameleon effect. People who are connecting physically and emotionally in a conversation will tend to mimic each other's gestures and postures, both crossing their legs, for instance, to a degree. You can do this consciously to induce a connection by deliberately mimicking someone. Similarly, nodding your head as they talk and smiling will deepen the connection. Even better, you can enter the spirit of the other person. You absorb their mood deeply and reflect it back to them. You create a feeling of rapport. People secretly crave this emotional rapport in their daily lives because they get it so rarely. It has a hypnotic effect and appeals to people's narcissism as you become their mirror. In practicing this type of empathy, keep in mind that you must maintain a degree of distance. You are not becoming completely enmeshed in the emotion of another. This will make it hard for you to analyze what you are picking up and can lead to a loss of control that is not healthy. Also, doing this too strongly and obviously can create a creepy effect. The nodding, smiling, and mirroring at selected moments should be subtle, almost impossible to detect. Number 3, analytic empathy. The reason you are able to understand your friends or partners so deeply is that you have a lot of information about their tastes, values, and family background. We have all had the experience of thinking we know someone, but over time having to adjust our original impression once we get more information. So while physical empathy is extremely powerful, it must be supplemented by analytic empathy. This can prove particularly helpful with people toward whom we feel resistant and whom we have a hard time identifying with, either because they are very different from us or because there is something about them that repels us. In such cases we naturally resort to judging and putting them into categories. There are people out there who are not worth the effort, supreme fools or true psychopaths. But for most others who seem hard to figure out, we should see it as an excellent challenge and a way to improve our skills. As Abraham Lincoln said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." Interesting. Analytic empathy comes mostly through conversation and gathering information that will allow you to get inside the spirit of others. Some pieces of information are more valuable than others. For instance, you want to get a read on people's values, which are mostly established in their earliest years. People develop concepts of what they consider strong, sensitive, generous, and weak, often based on their parents and their relationship to them. One woman will see a man crying as a sign of sensitivity and be attracted to it, while another will see it as weak and repulsive. By not understanding people's values on this level, or by projecting your own, you will misread their reactions and create unnecessary conflicts. Your goal then is to gather as much as you can about the early years of the people you are studying and their relationship to their parents and siblings. Keep in mind that their current relationship to family will also speak volumes about the past. Try to get a read on their reactions to authority figures. This will help you see to what extent they have a rebellious or submissive streak. Their taste in partners will also say a lot. If people seem reluctant to talk, try asking open-ended questions or begin with a sincere admission of your own to establish trust. In general, people love to talk about themselves and their past, and it is usually quite easy to get them to open up. Look for trigger points, see Chapter 1, that indicate points of extreme sensitivity. If they come from another culture, it is all the more important to understand this culture from within their experience. Your goal in general is to find out what makes them unique. You are looking precisely for what is different from yourself and the other people you know. Number 4, the empathetic skill. Becoming empathetic involves a process. Like anything, in order to make sure that you are really making progress and improving your ability to understand people on a deeper level, you need feedback. This can come in one of two forms, direct and indirect. In the direct form, you see people about their thoughts and feelings to get a sense of whether you have guessed correctly. This must be discreet and based on a level of trust, but it can be a very accurate gauge of your skill. Then there is the indirect form. You sense a greater rapport in how certain techniques have worked for you. To work on this skill, keep several things in mind. The more people you interact with in the flesh, the better you will get at this. And the greater the variety of people you meet, the more versatile your skill will become. Also, keep a sense of flow. Your ideas about people never quite settle into a judgment in an encounter. Keep your attention active to see how the other person changes over the course of a conversation and the effect you are having on them. Be alive to the moment. Try to see people as they interact with others besides you. People are often very different depending on the person they are involved with. Try to focus not on categories but on the feeling tone and mood that people invoke in you, which is continually shifting. As you get better at this, you will discover more and more cues that people give as to their psychology. You will notice more. Continually mix the visceral with the analytic. Seeing improvement in your skill level will excite you greatly and motivate you to go deeper. In general, you will notice a smoother ride through life as you avoid unnecessary conflicts and misunderstandings. Wow. Okay, here's a quote. The deepest principle of human nature is the craving to be appreciated. By William James. Okay, so that's the end of part 1. Tomorrow I'll be reading part 2 from chapter 2. Part 2 is 4 examples of narcissistic types. In conclusion, subscribe to the channel. Comment any questions you have. Like if the information was inspiring for you. And share this knowledge with other alchemists. Also, you can follow me on Instagram for more progressive knowledge. Max_Bugatti_8008. I'm all about family first. I'm an investor, stocks and alternative energy. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an aerospace botanist. I have a confidence building program, and I'm currently out in the Bay Area, San Fran. So, in conclusion, while you're slaying dragons, I'll be taming them.